Welcome in to the Late Night Gamecock Show. I am your host, Matt Anderson, and joining me, as always, is Alex Jones of thebigspur.com. Alex, we had no show last week. How did you spend your week?
Yeah, I was on the road a little bit. Went and saw some recruits at two showcases actually. One in Fort Mill on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and then went down to Orangeburg Prep on Thursday night and saw Tilden Riley, who's a 2026 tight end recruit, and got to talk to him a little bit. And he's going to have his official visits coming up. But got on the road, saw a bunch of recruits at South Carolina Gamecocks in a few classes. So it was a productive week. But we're back here tonight, and I'm sure we're going to cover it all.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're definitely gonna talk about that here in a little bit. I actually was on vacation last week, so I spent 9 days at the beach, and honestly, I tried to unplug as much as I could from Gamecock athletics. I watched the midweek game, I watched the weekend series, but I didn't watch every second of it, to be honest. And even with softball, like I was tuned in, but it was family time. It was beach time, and it was an opportunity to hang out. So I'm going to lean on you a little bit about this past week, Alex. But really glad to be back with y'all tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about Colin Murray Boyles. He went to the NBA draft combine. There's a lot to digest there. We're going to talk a ton of football. The lines are already out right now for opening week, so the Gamecocks and the Hokies will face off against each other in Atlanta, and we have a couple other games that we're going to talk about there. Also, the odds have come out for SEC teams for win-loss over-under, so that's just crazy to me that we're so far away from the start of the season, but I guess when spring practice ends, it's time.
Yep. Yeah, once spring practice ends, you kind of know what the rosters are at this point. I mean, it always starts. It feels like every year it starts earlier.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that Darren Usher was on the show earlier today with JB and Phil, and I think JC was there for a little bit today in the morning show, and then Phil and JC took it all the way. But Darren Usher was on talking about how we felt like we did a good job in the spring portal. We addressed some needs, but at the same time, there's still players in the portal, and you want to get them in as soon as possible. So go back and check out that show from earlier today if you want to get Darren Usher's comments. But we're going to talk a lot of recruiting. Like Alex said, he's been going to these showcases. He's seen a lot of kids. He's talked to a lot of kids. We're going to dive into quarterback recruiting. Quarterback is the most important position on the field. And as crazy as it sounds, there's already 2028 offers that are going out. Yeah. Then we'll close football out with Alex and I giving our 5 potential guys we feel good about, surprise players for this upcoming football season. Softball, as you all know, is feeling super. They're going to host UCLA in the Super Regionals in Columbia, South Carolina this weekend. And then we're going to close out the show talking about baseball. We'll talk about the season as a whole, what topics are there for the offseason. So a lot to unpack there. But as always, we appreciate all of you for joining us tonight. And Alex, with that, go ahead and roll the show notes.
Welcome to the Late Night Gamecock Show from Chief Sports, South Carolina. Here are your hosts, Matt Anderson and Alex Jones of thebigspur.com.
Well, Alex, you can tell I'm rusty because I said roll the show notes instead of the intro credits. But hey, that's okay. That's okay. We'll be fine. So Colin Murray Boyles. What'd you say, Alex?
So we gotta get back in the flow.
Gotta get going again. All right, let's go. Colin Murray Boyles went to the NBA draft combine. And Alex, I know there was a lot of chatter on the Big Spur and a lot of chatter on social media. But after the combine, despite his poor 3-point shooting that everyone saw on video, and I remind people, you saw a snippet of his action at the combine. Yeah. You didn't see every shot that he put up. You didn't see the live competition. You didn't see any of that. You just saw a ball that looked like it had been oiled up for Colin to shoot some threes. But Alex, you covered this pretty thoroughly. Where are you seeing Colin Murray Boyles in mock drafts at this point?
Yeah, so in ESPN's and Jonathan Giovanni and Jeremy Wu, who had their post-combine mock draft right after, I think the day after the combine ended, they had him going number 9 overall to the Toronto Raptors. And I think you've seen him kind of around that range. CBS Sports, they had a few, had him going number 7 overall to the Pelicans and 12 to the Hawks, 12 to the Bulls, 13 to the Atlanta Hawks. And I think I saw it, even another one, maybe in Bleacher Report, had him going number 12 overall to the Bulls. So I think it's one of those where you're starting to see he's going to be. It seems like it's a pretty good shot coming out of the combine that he's going to be a lottery pick, and I think that was kind of the thought all along was he would go into the lottery, and it doesn't seem like anything he did at the combine really affected his standing because he was kind of in that range a little bit. Almost when you look at the projections, maybe even helped himself a little bit more at the combine, and because going number 7 overall, you weren't seeing a whole lot of that pre-combine, but now you're seeing him in that 7 to 12 range where I think that's pretty comfortably where he'll be in the draft.
Yeah, and Alex, like you said, I don't expect CMB back at this point. I know that one of the things that he has said to people behind the scenes and sources that we've talked to is that being a lottery pick is important to him. And the combine has come and gone. And despite the 3-point shooting you saw online, he's still being projected as a lottery pick. So I expect him to go there. He has until June 15th, I believe.
It's actually, I think later. I'll find the date while you're sitting there talking. It's actually the NCAA withdrawal date's coming up.
Yeah, so I looked online earlier, and I think it was. Let's see, I can't remember, but it's some. I think it's like a week or two before the draft. You have to actually say what you're doing, and the draft is the 22nd. Maybe the draft's 15th and 16th, and then it's like June 5th. You have to make your declaration. Anyway, we don't expect Colin Murray-Boyles to come back, but at the same time, there's still a lot of this draft process to unfold. There's individual workouts, there's group workouts, there's opportunities for teams to make promises to players, and players will rise. I promise you, if you look at any mock draft, just go tonight and Google 5 mock drafts, CBS, ESPN, whatever. It's going to change a heck of a lot before draft night comes. So we'll see what Colin does. But Alex, at the end of the day, man, I'm just wondering, what do you think they're going to do with that last scholarship spot?
Yeah, I guess we'll kind of see. Obviously, there's still players in the portal, but I'm not sure what the route that's going to be. You got the 14 already. See what you can find, but it kind of feels like the roster for the most part is set at this point. Obviously, with being only one spot open, and that one spot being open for Colin Murray-Boyles if he wanted to come back. But it kind of feels like the roster is set, and maybe if they find something that is a right fit, or you kind of just what they want to do, maybe they use that extra spot. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
I think the most interesting thing is to see how it plays out with all these people that have exhausted their eligibility and still in the transfer portal. We'll see what litigation comes through. We'll see what might allow them to come back to school. Those are the people that are hanging out there. For me, I think it's probably going to be a non-scholarship player unless there's just somebody that falls through the cracks that they say can help us next year. I wouldn't be opposed at all for them taking a high school project that they know that, I don't want to say run off in a year if there's no progression, but at the same time, I think any kid that's 18 years old will take a scholarship for a year. So I would rather them not go the walk-on route. But look, my brother was a walk-on. I have a lot of love for walk-ons, but for South Carolina next year, I want them to be as good as they possibly can be. And a walk-on is probably not going to be that type of player. But moving on to football, Alex, the early lines out. I saw you had an article on thebigspur.com. So where is South Carolina? Are they favored? Are they underdog? What's it looking like for Virginia Tech?
Yeah, sitting around right now, DraftKings and FanDuel and kind of the sports book like that, ESPN Bet have the early lines out right now. And South Carolina's a 9.5-point favorite, which I think, is probably kind of about right for where we are right now. And those lines are starting to come out just because, for the most part, most of these teams know what the roster is going to look like, obviously, with the spring transfer portal window closed, and obviously there's still people in the portal, and there's probably going to still be a little bit of movement, but the rosters are for the most part set, so you're really starting to see those lines come out. And I think I saw the over under around 46 as well, which is really interesting. But we still have a while to that first game, but I think to talk about it, but 9.5, I think it's kind of about right with those first games. You really just never really know, and we'll get into Virginia Tech a little bit more down the road, but they got a lot to replace, and it really, I mean, their secondary, I think it's really going to be pretty much new. Offensive line's going to be new, so you just never really know with those first games and with both teams. But I kind of agreed with that 9.5 line and could see it really going both ways right now.
That's one thing that I'm going to be very interested in tracking, because I know, at least in the NFL, and I know this because I play a lot of fantasy football, that you kind of disregard the opening lines for the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season in the NFL, because that's like after 4 to 6 weeks, you have your data points. Like right now, I think that if you're going to bet on this game, you have to be very, very confident in your pick, because 9.5, you don't have that 10-point hook. There's a lot of variables that are out there. And with the 46 over under, I mean, golly, you're looking at 23. So maybe like 29 to 18, something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, that
line will probably obviously move through the summer, and obviously it's going to depend on if injuries happen for other team injuries. Well, just like any line that's during the season, it'll move a little bit. But I think for one thing, the thing you can look into that is what are people thinking about South Carolina right now, and to be a 9.5-point favorite against a power 4 team and on a neutral site, like obviously you can see what people are saying about South Carolina. There's a lot of hype around it, but that's something you can take from the early lines, is kind of seeing what the thought process, what the thinking is about South Carolina right now. And to be 9.5-point favorite, I think kind of shows a little bit of something.
It definitely shows some confidence that hasn't been there in a while. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But look at you got Texas at Ohio State. Ohio State's a 3.5-point favorite. You have Texas Christian at North Carolina. North Carolina is a 1.5-point favorite. And then you have Alabama at Florida State. Alabama, 11.5-point favorite. Auburn at Baylor. Auburn's a 2.5-point favorite. Syracuse at Tennessee. Tennessee is a 12.5-point favorite. Alex, any of those stand out to you just off the cuff?
What was the Texas one you said? What was the line?
So Texas is at Ohio State, and Ohio State is favored by 3.5.
Yeah, I mean, I think gotta give a little respect to the national champions, and I don't know. It's kind of like we talked about. I think these lines will kind of move a little bit, but I can see Ohio State maybe being a little bit more of a favorite in that one. But Texas is going to be good. I think they put a lot into this roster this year, so I don't know, but we'll kind of see.
All right, Alex, we're gonna go hot on the spot right now.
Okay.
And I'm not going to hold you to it, but just right now with what we know about college football, South Carolina minus 9.5 against Virginia Tech. Who would you take?
South Carolina to cover.
So I would take Virginia Tech. I think that line's going to be closer to 7.5 by the time the game kicks off. But anyway, I think the Gamecocks are going to win. Texas at Ohio State. Ohio State minus 3.5. Which way do you lean?
Ohio State. Okay. Not much. I got Ohio State touchdown. I'll go for that.
I'll take Ohio State minus 3.5 as well. TCU at North Carolina is so interesting. North Carolina minus 1.5. Woo!
North Carolina, the thing is, I don't know what their team's going to look like this year, because they obviously, all the attention is going to be around the Bill Belichick and all that. Yeah. But I mean, I think they've got some holes on the roster that maybe they filled, maybe they didn't. But what's the line? Say they got the line one more time.
North Carolina minus 1.5.
And it's in Chapel Hill.
Yeah. I
take TCU. Because I think I think it's going to be a little bit of TCU, because nobody's going to be talking about TCU in the media. I think there's going to be a little bit of they're going to want to prove a point going to Chapel Hill. And I'll take, as we stand here right now, not even fully into the summer yet, I'll go.
Yeah, I'm going to take TCU as well. But that's scary. Alabama at Florida State minus 11.5. I'll take Florida State plus 11.5. I think that they figured some stuff out in the offseason with their coaching changes.
I still think Alabama wins, but you're on the road against Florida State that they're going to be hungry because of what happened last year. There's going to be a lot they're going to put into that game, but I think Alabama wins, but they don't cover that spread.
Yeah, Doak Campbell's going to be wild. Then you got the last one is Syracuse versus Tennessee, so it's a neutral field game. I'm so used to basketball, neutral court.
They're in Atlanta.
Yeah, so Tennessee is a 12.5-point favorite over Syracuse. I might be the sucker, Alex. I'm going to take Syracuse plus 12.5 there just because of the turmoil in Tennessee, but I'm probably an idiot.
I'm close. I'd be close to doing it, but I'd go Tennessee just barely. I can see
All
that
right.
being a 14, maybe like a late touchdown.
I like it. I don't hate it at all, honestly. So rapid fire here, Alex. We're going to go through the SEC win totals for each team. Just
Okay.
initial thoughts. So do we want to spend a lot of time on this? But Vanderbilt 4.5 over under. Where are you
Over.
leaning? Over.
Yeah.
All right, I'm leaning over as well. Mississippi State 3.5.
Over just slightly.
Yeah, I'm over. Missouri 7.5.
Can I push?
Can't push you 7.5, my friend.
I know. I'll go under because I think it's going to be at 7.
I'm gonna go under as well. Texas A&M 7.5.
Over.
I go under. Ole Miss 8.5.
Under.
Woo! Woo! I agree. I agree. Lane
I don't
Kiffin
feel
has
good
not
about it.
consistently
I'm
done
going
it. This one's so interesting to me. Kentucky 4.5.
I don't know what to think about Kentucky, to be honest. Like it's a huge year for Mark Stoops. I mean, Zach Calzada is going to be the quarterback. Like it's a lot they had to get better at from last year. And you said it's 4.5.
It's 4.5, which essentially means that they have to win 2 games against the SEC plus Louisville.
Yeah, I'll go over, but it's not much that I'll go over.
Yeah, I think Kentucky's gonna be 5-7.
Yeah.
Arkansas 5.5. They know what they're doing, Alex.
Yeah, I'll go over. I think they'll get to a bowl.
All right, you got Auburn 7.5, and this one's easy under for me.
Yeah, I agree. I go under. I think they'll get to a bowl game, but I think it's 6 wins.
Oklahoma 6.5.
I go over. I think they're going to be better this year.
Oh gosh, Oklahoma 6.5.
I'm in the basis off. We're going off. I don't have their schedule in front of me, and I have
No. We're just talking generalities. We're gonna have a full preview of SEC later.
If I had the schedule in front of me, maybe it'd be different. But because but right now I'd go over.
Yeah, I'm gonna say under for Oklahoma. I think they go 6-6. Florida 6.5. We both predicted them to win 3 games last year.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'll go over.
All right, I'm gonna go under there. Tennessee 9.5 is an easy under.
Yeah, under. Yeah.
LSU 8.5. I'm gonna say under. I think they underachieve.
I think so too. I kind of think so.
All right, so then you got Georgia 9.5.
I'll go over.
You got Texas. I'm gonna go over too. Texas 9.5.
Over.
All right, then you got. I'll go over too. Then you got Alabama 9.5.
I'm interested to see what happens at quarterback there. I mean, that's going to be huge. See how that goes, but I'll go over.
I'm
putting way too much thought on this. That's we're this early doing this, but
I'm gonna go under on Alabama 9.5.
Yeah,
and then the last one, Alex. I got to ask you this one.
Okay.
South Carolina 7.5.
Nah, I'm going over.
All right, I'm going over as well. Okay, Alex, we got a list in about 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and run through some football recruiting here, and then we'll take a sponsor break. I just want to hear about the showcases you've been to, any nuggets, whatever you want to do here.
Yeah, so first one we went to Hale McGranhan and I. We went up to Fort Mill to see kind of I think they call it the Football City USA Showcase, and it was pretty loaded. You had schools from really both of these showcases, they kind of feature schools from all around the areas. And so this one, you had South Point, which is home to Jazavian Currents, 4-star safety, and a commit, and Anthony Baxter, the offensive lineman commit. And, I thought Currents looked the part, as he always does. It kind of got to see a little bit of good on good from an offensive defense perspective, and he kind of did it all, kind of being that rangy safety. Then he come up and would blitz at the line. So that's, wasn't anything new that you really saw from Jazavian. He's really good. And, I saw one prospect that's, a lot in this showcase, one of the things we're kind of focusing on with these younger prospects in these future classes. And Seth Tillman, defensive lineman, who's a 4-star from South Point, I thought, had a really good rep. And one of the reps I was watching him, and I think he's going. I mean, South Carolina's already, I think, in a pretty good spot so far. There's going to be some challenges. I think he just got offered by LSU, but in state, South Carolina always does pretty well, especially in that area. And I think they're off to a pretty good start there. And some of the other guys, Josh Dobson, Catawba Ridge cornerbacks, 5-star by some. Right now it's so early, some aren't giving out 5 stars, but he's kind of projecting right now that he's going to be a 5-star player, and he's going to be one of the top cornerbacks in the country. Like I've seen him twice in person now, and you can see why. Like he's fits that mold of what they're looking for at cornerback, and I mean he's got 5-star written all over him, and South Carolina's also here again done a pretty good job. And another one, Sequel Patterson. I know we've talked about him a lot. Got to see him again from Indian Land. He's a baller. Like he's really good, and I mean he's continued to rack up offers. And so it was just you had a lot of college coaches there. You had Torian Gray and Mike Furry from South Carolina were there. Clemson was there. Clemson had a coach or two there. Chris Rump was there from Clemson, and I think there was a few more. I'm forgetting who else from Clemson was there, but Glenn Schumann, defensive coordinator for Georgia, was there. And they were Kentucky, Duke. Like it was loaded. With
it's a who's who.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible, and just to have everybody, all those schools in one spot. And I think one thing is kind of neat about those types of things is all those guys are there to see a Jazavian Current, or there to see a Sequel Patterson, Joshua Dobson. But what those type of events also allow for are a guy that maybe is a little bit underknown, and then you have a really good practice in front of those coaches because that are there to see those other guys. They're going to be noticed by those coaches as well. So I think it's just pretty cool that these schools are starting to do these events, and hope to see a little bit more of them. And quickly on the next day, I went over to Spartanburg for the Spartanburg showcase at Spartanburg High School, and saw some of the future Polo Anderson, who did commit to Clemson on last Friday. He was there, and he's really good, and that was a really good get from Clemson. And South Carolina battled there, but I think it was a little bit too much there with Clemson. And some other guys, Trent Lynch is a running back over at Spartanburg. He flashed a little bit to me, and his recruitment is starting to get going. Zion Dawkins, a 2028 cornerback. It's kind of crazy that we're already talking about these future classes like this, but Zion Dawkins is a guy that, if he just continues to grow, and I think he could be someone South Carolina goes after. And I think I saw today he got offered by Boston College, and he's got a few more offers coming his way probably. He's really good, has some good pass breakups, one interception, and some one-on-one routes I saw. So, it was just it was overall. Oh, and Aiden Gibson, the running back over at Woodruff, was really good. And I think South Carolina's already offered, and they put themselves in a good spot for him as well. He's and so I think with him, Ian Jones was another offensive lineman. Kind of saw he's a really young guy, but looks really good right now. It could be a guy down the road that we're talking about. We'll probably see him in some summer camps, and see if he gets in that summer camp circuit, because he could be a guy that I can see blowing up with just how well he's performed so far. But it's just really good to see all those teams and all those different areas, and cool to see all the college coaches out there. But got to lay eyes on some of these younger in-state recruits, because this 27 class in South Carolina is pretty loaded. Like it's unreal how good this class is going to be, and that's going to be huge for South Carolina with the priority they put on in-state recruiting. But it's a really good class, and it seems like there's some really good 28 prospects starting to form as well.
It's so interesting because I like what you said, having these schools put on these events, having these kind of cities put on these events, and like drawing people in, and coaches being allowed to go, because like coaches can't even go to the Shrine Bowl anymore, but they're allowed to go to this type of thing, which is so important. Because Alex, I remember when we were last summer at, the indoor facility and the practice fields, and the coaches were watching these kids. They had film. They were asking high school coaches, hey, who's that kid? Like, I've never heard of this kid before. And, it's always great when those kids go to 7-on-7s. And look, they don't go to just South Carolina. They go to Duke. They go to Clemson. They go to Florida State. They go all over the place. But just having that opportunity to see these kids in a setting that's a little bit different than just watching film that you got sent from the coach on VHS like it was in 1990. Yeah, it's so different, which is so cool to me. Alex, before we move on, let's go ahead and talk about the quarterback recruiting right now. It looks like to me, and you tell me if I'm crazy, at this point, I think it's probably Landon Duckworth or a developmental guy in this upcoming class, or potentially a transfer that comes in through the portal next year. But where does South Carolina stand right now in 2026, 2027, and 2028 quarterback recruiting?
Yeah, so you kind of hit the nail on the head. Right now, Landon Duckworth, I think, kind of have all eyes on him. It's a battle where, I think a lot of people, with him being committed to South Carolina already, or being once committed to South Carolina, and decommitting, I think a lot of people maybe wrote it off as, South Carolina wasn't going to have a chance there, but there's still a lot of mutual interest on this one. And he's going to be in for the official visit. And, I think Ole Miss is one to watch with him. I think they've kind of surged here a little bit in this recruitment, and keep an eye on Auburn as well, being the in-state school. They're going to get an official visit as well. So I think just kind of it's going to be interesting to see just how this recruitment kind of takes shape, because it's going to be a key official visit stretch, and not 100% sure when he's planning on announcing a commitment, but it's going to be a key official visit stretch, and South Carolina's going to have their shot. And then so far in 2027, there's a few offers out as well. And the two to kind of keep an eye on are Trent Seaborn, who's been to South Carolina, a handful of times already. And, South Carolina's kind of feels like South Carolina's really going after him hard. Got a 6'1", 200-pound 4-star out of Thompson, Alabaster, Alabama. Really good player. He can sling it. Saw him at a camp. It's the Carrollton High School camp, or the Under Armour camp at Carrollton High School. He was really good, and he can spin it. And I think, he had a spring visit that I think was pretty key for him. He got to see kind of the ins and outs of the program. And another one to keep an eye on too is Jace Johnson. He's one that South Carolina's offered out of Lowndes and Valdosta, Georgia. So that just keep an eye on those two. And then, even now the 2028 quarterback class is starting to form, that they're starting to get some of those offers out. And so it will just, continue to form into those classes, especially those 2028 guys. I mean, they got wonderful minds right now. The fourth out of Vero Beach, who they've offered in just yesterday, actually, Neiman Lawrence out of Northwestern in Miami, Florida, landed an offer from South Carolina. And those guys kind of project to maybe be two of the better quarterbacks in the country based, looking at their offer list and their stats so far. So, South Carolina's, going after some of the best quarterbacks in the country. And, we'll see. Obviously, the 28 board is so early, and it will continue to form. But, starting to see those 2027 guys come into focus along with Duckworth in the 2026 class.
And that's one of the reasons I asked you about that, Alex, just because if you have a quarterback in your recruiting class and a high-end quarterback, it really moves the needle for every other position. And Alex, tell me if I'm crazy here, but we all know that quarterback's the most important position on the field during a game. But I think quarterback's also the most important position in a recruiting class.
Yeah, I mean, it's key if you can go ahead and get a quarterback in early on a class, because those guys they're just really good at building classes, because you have to think about it from a quarterback's perspective. If I'm a wide receiver, a 4-star wide receiver or something in Innocent State, and I see South Carolina has a quarterback commit already, like I'm gonna look into him. If I like him, that's pretty attractive option right there. And just it's really every position. Offensive linemen want to play with really good quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. It's just a key, and those guys typically are really good recruiters as well and help build classes. You've seen that in the past at South Carolina as well.
Yeah, there's not many quarterbacks that aren't alphas that take charge of things. Like if you win a high school quarterback job, you're pretty much a team leader. So, like you said, like talking about recruiting and all that. Well, Alex, let's go ahead and hit a sponsor break, and we come back. Let's talk about 5 Gamecocks who could surprise next year, and then we also have softball and baseball to get to.
Mike here for one of the better dining options in the capital city. When I first moved there, I asked people around the radio station, where are the best wings? Well, the consensus was D's Wings. That was then. Today, they still have the best wings, but it's so much more now in their new location at 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia. Yeah, they get voted the best wings on a routine basis. Yes, they get voted the best sports bar on a routine basis, but they're not just about wings, and really, they're not just a sports bar. It is a family-run local restaurant and bar with 20 TVs and 25 beers on tap. And how about these daily specials? Every Monday night at D's, you've got 75-cent wings from 4 until closing. Tacos on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, 18 wings and a pitcher of beer for $29. You've also got ribs and oyster bucket specials on Thursday. And no matter how big the party is, 20 or more, no problem. Just call ahead of time and they'll take terrific care of you. They'll do takeout as well. And guess what? A human will answer the phone and take the order. Billy and his staff do an outstanding job. Check out D's 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia.
So, Alex, last night I was pretty proud of the wings that I made. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, you kind of seemed somewhat impressed, but you also said they weren't D's wings.
Yeah. Hey, you can't ever go wrong with D's wings. Not to take any offense to the wings you made, but you just can't ever go wrong with D's wings.
Well, I just got a Traeger, and like I'm trying to fine tune it. And yesterday I just waited too long to put the wings on the smoker. And if I had had a couple more hours, it'd have been perfect. I had to do it in the air fryer. And look, you shouldn't air fry wings in 20 minutes. That's just not how you do it. But the sauce was fantastic. I will say that. I was pretty proud of my sauce.
Hey, maybe D's Wings needs to hire you.
You know what, man? Like some days I wonder if I should just do that instead. But all right, Alex, let's be quick on this because I do want to get to softball and baseball. But we got 5 surprise players for you. I'll go first, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but some guy that I think is going to be a surprise this year is Donovan Murph. He's going to be a true freshman. He's not even on campus yet, but when I saw him in 7-on-7, I've watched his film. I've seen him live. I went to an Irmo game this past year. He's just different. That's just the best way I can say it. I've watched his playoff games on TV the last 2 years. He's just different, man. And he's a guy that I don't think enough people are realizing how good he can be. I'm not going to say he's going to be Alshon, although the bloodline is there for a true freshman, but he's so good.
Yeah, with him, you just wonder, like, even if I think with all this talk about him, some of the confidence you hear about this guy coming and play right away, like what could he have done if he was in for spring practice as well? But I think he's so talented and so, I guess, mature as a wide receiver. Like he could come in and make that impact right away. And kind of with me sticking in the wide receiver, and the first one I mentioned was Jared Brown, and a lot of that was kind of mentioned just because I think last year, and even Mike Furry kind of said this during the spring as well. Like I think Jared Brown was still kind of work on becoming that overall, just improve overall as a wide receiver at the outside position. Just because at Coastal Carolina, he was kind of a gadget type player, as Mike Furry said, where he was kind of coming in motion, getting handoffs in the backfield. But I think last year he was just kind of learning to become a better receiver. And you saw flashes of it. I mean, think of that Missouri game. He took that screen to the house. You can see his speed. You saw, and he dealt with a little bit of injuries too that may have slowed him down a little bit. But he had some big games early on. Kentucky and LSU, he made some nice catches, and really down the stretch as well. Had that big catch on that scramble play that Norris broke on like the 5-yard line at Vanderbilt. He was, downfield open on that big play. So I think, some of those returners get talked about, Mazio, Nick Harvard, Drake Jacobs, but keep an eye on Jared Brown. And I think he's had a pretty good spring, and I think he's got a chance to surprise this year.
I'm right there with you. If you just look at his yards per reception for his career, it's outstanding. And he is a big play guy, and just finding out how to unlock him can be huge. The next one for me, and this is a guy that I don't know if it would be so much of a surprise, but the surprise that I'm going to mention is how good I think this kid can be. And it's Michael Smith, tight end. He's going to be a sophomore. You saw him catch a touchdown against, I think, Kentucky. I think he had 2 touchdown catches on the season. But Josh Simon was the guy this past year. But don't sleep on Michael Smith. He was a top 100 tight end. And I don't know if most people realize how hard it is to be a top 100 kid as a tight end, because running backs, offensive linemen, wide receivers, quarterbacks, defensive ends, they dominate the top 100. But this kid was that good, and he had offers from everybody, and he showed it immediately when he came on campus. So Michael Smith, I think, is prime for a big year.
Yeah, I agree. And he's one that was out for spring practice, had a little bit of an injury. And I don't think we know for sure what the injury was, but didn't seem to be anything too serious. He, the few times we were out there for an open practice, he was out there doing some light stretching, jogging around. So I think he's fine. But, I think with him, with how much he played last year, you always see that freshman to sophomore jump, but just how much he played last year, I don't think you have to worry too much about it because he knows the system for the most part. And he's able to sit there and learn under Mike Shula as well. But I think he could be in for a big year, kind of stepping into that Josh Simon role a little bit. And they got a few options. I'll get to another guy here in just a little bit for the surprise player, but I'm really interested to see Michael Smith. And so the next one I had was Peyton Williams. He's one that I think, in my mind, kind of penciling in as the starter at that safety spot with in Nick Emmenwari's spot. And I threw him in that article just because when I was thinking about it, like every time he comes in to the game, he's making plays. Think about what would that have been 3 years ago now, that Tennessee game, the upset game. South Carolina put up 150 points on Tennessee. Like, I mean, when he came in for Nick Emmenwari on that ejection, when Nick Emmenwari got ejected for targeting, like he made some plays in that game, had a couple of pass breakups, and was not easy for a freshman to come in and do against Tennessee's offense, and that kind of air raid, spread you out, attack, and you had to imagine they're attacking Peyton Williams in that game, but he stood up, and he every time he gets in, he makes plays. Vanderbilt this year, DQ Smith. has a little bit of a back injury pregame, and he comes in and he's making plays. Almost had an interception on a 4th down against Diego Pavia. So I think he's one that, he fits kind of the measurables for what they're looking for, that safety. You can see a little bit from a size perspective of Nick Emenwari, but I just think it kind of feels like it's his time now, and he can come in and he can fit in, and it's not going to be easy replacing Nick Emenwari, because Nick Emenwari was a freak at safety. Like, he can do it all fast, play making ability. But I think, I think Peyton Williams has a chance to really step in. It just feels like it's his time, and he's ready for it.
Look, the next guy I'm going to tell you is Donovan Darden, and he's another freshman. And it's just because I've only heard rave reviews about him. He is the one guy on the defensive side of the ball that's a true freshman that I've just heard, like, this guy was better than we thought he was. And so for him, I don't know what the final stats will be. I don't know if it's going to be a Melvin Ingram freshman year. I don't know what it's going to be, but I just feel like he's going to be a surprise. He's going to have 2 or 3 big plays this year. Maybe not going to be a Dylan Stewart, but he's going to be good.
I kind of wonder if he can fill that Fred Johnson role from this past year, where, think about with Fred, he had those trio of guys, and really you could throw Bengali Kamara in there too when he was in there. But really, for the most part, those trio of guys of D Knight, Bam Martin, Scott, and Debo, who were ahead of him on the depth chart. But he was kind of that, maybe first off the bench kind of guy as a freshman. And I just kind of think Donovan Darden can be that this year when you kind of look at where the depth chart stands right now. Like, I think you have to like where the transfers are, Sean Murphy and Justin Okoronkwo, and then you also got Fred in there. It kind of feels like it's the same situation a little bit, where he can fit that role as well as, that Fred Johnson type, and he's really good. A guy that continued to rise in rankings in high school, and I think he's
special teams especially.
Yeah, I think he could absolutely make an impact on special teams. So, kind of the next guy that I'm coming up on, Desmond Umeozulu. I think he's one that's kind of been the talk of the preseason or really the preseason and the season. It's kind of year 3 going in for him, and he's a guy that I think he's got a chance to, like, you think about, there's going to be opportunities and snaps at edge. Like, obviously Dylan Stewart's going to be on the field a lot, but they like to rotate a lot in that room. And you think about where they are from a depth standpoint, they're in a really good spot from a depth standpoint there. But that other spot opposite him, like, you got Brian Thomas, you got JT Gear fighting for reps, but it kind of feels like each year he's been at South Carolina, he's taken a step forward physically. But now I think his game, like, I think you hear Sterling Lucas talk about him taking the next step in spring, and it kind of feels like same with I was talking with Peyton Williams. Kind of feels like it's his time. Like, he's had 2 years in the program, and it just kind of feels like it's his shot.
Yeah, I really wanted to put Dez on my list too, because I think he has such a good opportunity, and people forget he was a top 80 kid. He's not chopped liver. Zavari Sandy is my next one. At the end of the day, Zavari just keeps popping up in conversations. I don't know if he's going to be somebody that starts second on the team, second on the depth chart, whatever. But we all know that they shuffle through all the time on the defensive side of the ball, especially the secondary, and keep guys fresh. And the talent level in the secondary, I think, is probably something we haven't seen in a while. And it's better than it was 4 years ago. And I think it's been better every single year. So Zavari Sandy is my other guy. And then Mason Love, redshirt freshman. He drilled a field goal, and I think he's somebody that you're going to be able to count on him next year. So, Alex, go ahead and run through your other folks. I got to take a quick phone call, so just take me off the screen, and I'll be right back.
Gotcha. So, yeah, kind of going back real quick to what Matt was talking about with Zavari Sandy. Like, I absolutely can think he'd be a guy that surprises this year. He's one that was bad on that injury last year, didn't play, had the torn ACL, but you saw some flashes as a freshman as well with him. And as Matt mentioned, they do kind of like to rotate in that safety spot, or in safety and really the whole secondary for the most part. But he could be a guy that I think had some really good moments in the spring game. And just we talk about how talented that secondary is. Like, there's just really deep, and we've talked about it at different positions, not just at one spot, but that corner spot. They got so many different guys. There, Bakari Swain, who's going to be back with the team in the summer, and then you got those other corners. You got Judge Collier, who's probably a good chance to start, and then you got Miles Norwood, who maybe gets forgotten about a little bit with those other guys, and Brandon Cisse as well. So, not to go off too much on the secondary, but it's a loaded secondary, and South Carolina's been recruiting for this, and they've kind of built it to where they feel good about a lot of guys, really 1, 2, 3, almost at every position, and a lot of younger guys guys, not to forget about with Lewis Solomon and David Busey, Kelvin Hunter. Those guys also, it seems like to be taking a big step forward heading into year 2 in the program. Real quick, a few other I had on my list. Maurice Brown, the second tight end. I mentioned getting back to that tight end room earlier. He's one that I think just does whatever he can to get on the field, and the same with Peyton Williams in a sense where it seems like every time he's on the field, he makes a play. I mean, he had the block punt against LSU this past year, and I think with him, it was a really cool moment for him just because I think the week before or during the week of practice, he got put on scholarship at South Carolina. So you could see just the respect the teammates and coaches had for him. But Sean Elliott had some really good things to say about him in the spring practice, saying that he's one of the more explosive players we have with the ball in his hands. And he mentioned in one of the scrimmages in the spring, he had a huge run down the sideline. He's strong, he's physical. Sean Elliott said he's a bull with the ball in his hands. It's hard to tackle. He said the strength and speed that he brings is pretty intimidating, to be honest with you. So he's just a guy that, it could be in a few different options. Interestingly enough, like in the spring, in the bowl game, they had him in like a fullback, H-back position, which really intriguing that I think he could play a role in, because you can see from his physicality and his size and his speed, he could fit perfectly into that role and, become a playmaker. And I still think even on special teams, he's going to make an impact as well, because he kind of mentioned to me when I talked to him at the, at the gala, he just wants to do whatever he can to get on the field and make an impact for the team. So really interested to see how he continues to come along this season and into the preseason camp. But the last one I had on my list that I published about a week ago was Jaworn Howland. He's one that I think when you look at his size and speed, he continues to make a lot of plays. Or when he got in, it seems like he flashed a little bit. And I just kind of wonder, like with him, like it almost feels like same with him. It's his time. And he's one that you saw the flashes. You can see the athleticism, the speed, the explosiveness. And, I think he played a good bit against Wofford. And I think a lot of times when people think about how it's just that fumble against Illinois kind of comes back to haunt him a little bit. And that's kind of an image people have. But I think he's got a chance. Like you hear some talk about him. Like I thought he had some really good moments in that bowl game and throughout the season. And they're going to need him to step up. Obviously, you're still waiting to hear about the Rasul Faison update, with his fighting to get the waiver with the extra year. But, the running back room overall is good, in a good spot, and we'll see. But Howell's going to be a guy that, could very well be counted on for some reps, and going to be battling Matthew Fuller and Oscar Attaway and Faison too as well. But, I'm really intrigued by Howell and think, it's just he's continuing to learn to be an SEC back, and you saw that last year. But he's still young. But he showed what he can do at South Carolina State, being an All-American at that level and running for, I think it was just over 800 yards. So really impressed with Howell and think he's got a chance to make an impact this year.
I agree with you, and I think that Faison's probably the best of the running backs right now. So the Gamecocks would love to make sure that he's eligible. When this stuff gets drawn out, man, it kills me because it could go either way. Yeah. And right now, South Carolina is very frustrated because all the paperwork, all the documentation has been there for 4 months, and everything has been there that has been approved before. So, not surprised that he got an attorney, but yeah, I like Howell a lot. I like Fuller a lot. I like Attaway a lot. Like it's a very good running back room. But let's move on, Alex. Let's talk a little bit about softball. Softball over the weekend, swept their regional. They won the games they had to go to super regional. They hosted. They're going to welcome UCLA this upcoming weekend. South Carolina is the number 8 seed in the women's college softball tournament, and UCLA is number 9. And it kind of came down to UCLA or South Carolina for who was going to get that last national seed. I think in a lot of ways, these teams are different, not just because UCLA is a perennial power and South Carolina is not, but just the way that they win games. From everything that I've seen and researched, UCLA seems to be a team that hits a lot of home runs. Are they going to do that against South Carolina?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. UCLA is really good, and they were vying, as you kind of mentioned, for that final national seed. But, they kind of the same as South Carolina, but even a little bit more kind of really controlled that it's still in football. I was about to talk about a scrimmage, but they really controlled their regional. I think they won. I had the schedule up right here. They won 9-1, 10-0, and 12-1. So it's going to be, they're going to probably put up some runs, but I think South Carolina's just the defense and pitching is going to be key, and South Carolina's been so good at that all year long. And I think you'll see kind of like the offense did over this past region, where maybe got off to a little bit of a slow start, but they figure it out and they find ways to win and find ways to put runs on the board. And like I mentioned, pitching and defense is going to be key. But Sam Gress and they've been awesome on the mound this year, and I think they're going to need to continue to do that and play good defense. And I think with how consistent they have been at doing that all year long, I think you feel pretty good about their chances.
Yeah, and I think home field matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be jam-packed in Columbia this upcoming weekend because there's no other sports to go watch anymore. And that's sad, but it's true. We're talking about baseball here in a second. But I do think the fact that it's in Columbia, UCLA is traveling across the country. If they rely on the home run and they don't get it, what's going to happen? I think that pitching and defense is always what favors any team in a do or die scenario, a win 2 out of 3 scenario. So excited to watch that this weekend. Alex, moving on to baseball, the season from hell is finally over. I don't know if that means that next year is going to be a season from hell or not, but I do like to look back when I look forward, and it's probably my catchphrase on here, look back to look forward. But last year, the team batting average was 274. This year it was 267. Last year, they had 417 RBIs, and this year they had 287. Last year, they had 977 total bases. This year, 773. This year, the pitching staff ERA was 6.41. Last year, it was 5.05. Last year, they gave up 74 home runs. This year, they gave up 95. Last year, opponent batting average was 247. This year, it was 268. Looking at individual players here, Ethan Petrie hit 306 last year, and although he didn't play the entire season, he hit 321 this year. Blake Jackson hit 293 last year, 194 this year. Kennedy Jones, 289 last year, 254 this year. So those are the guys that played a lot last year, and they were still kind of playing this year. And I don't know what the answer is. I know that Mark Kingston had a certain discipline that he wanted his kids to hit with. It was a lot about launch angles. It was a lot of, getting on base any way you can, walk, hit by pitch, hit, whatever. This year, it seems like Paul Maneri has been, I'd rather have a double than a walk. So swing the frickin' bat. I'd rather have a 3-run home run than manufacture 3 runs over 6 hits in an inning, whatever it is, 5 hits. I don't care. So, it was just different this year. And I think that a lot of the times Gamecock fans go back to the Ray Tanner era. And the Ray Tanner era was 2 base hits and a 3-run homer. It was elite pitching. It was just like, hey, we're going to score 7. They're going to score 2 to 4, and we're going to win. And if we lose, it's because we didn't hit well that day. And that's all well and good. But, Alex, like you've watched all these games. We've talked about it all season. The amount of times South Carolina was just not competitive was terrifying for a Gamecock baseball fan.
Yeah, that's one of the first things I was going to mention was just how many times that games just got away from them early on. And I think, I've mentioned a few times on here, things really started to turn kind of that Clemson series. They still had a little bit of momentum going into that series. You get swept by Clemson. And then I think it was really just that Oklahoma, that series where South kind of had, a series win really kind of in the bag and, gave it up late in that night or in the ninth inning. And things just really started to take a turn there. And then you had just so many games where you weren't in it in the SEC, where it got out of hand early, you just never were in it. And then you had the Texas A&M happenings where you lose really badly in that one game and then give up however many runs it was in that last inning for Texas A&M to walk it off when you're trying to salvage a win, and just kept snowballing. And just you gave up so many runs. And it's just as you mentioned, there's just way too many games where South Carolina wasn't competitive. And I think that just something that's really sticking out to people, and rightfully so. Like, that's something that you just can't happen. And, we're going to talk a little bit more about that here, but it's just going to be an interesting all season to see what the roster turnover is going to look like, and it just how difficult it's going to be even to recruit. You wonder how difficult it's going to be to recruit just because how bad of a season it was, and obviously you got so many teams in the Southeastern Conference that are doing so well right now, and a lot of these teams, especially in the SEC, they go after the same players in the high school and transfer portal and JUCO ranks. So it's going to be interesting all season to see, how well can they recruit to try to turn the roster over. And we don't know how many spots, obviously, they're going to have, just how many end up entering the transfer portal. But it's going to be an interesting off season, that's for sure.
I've talked to enough people that I feel confident in saying that there is definitely conflict in the locker room. There's conflict on the field between the coaching staff and the players. Now, look, I learned very early on in life, and I appreciate this from my father-in-law, and he told me, Matt, there's your side, their side, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And I think that is very important for everyone to remember, that your truth might not be my truth. My truth might not be your truth, but there's something about the truth being in there. And I sit back and I think about it, and look, like Palmineri can stand on all of his records. Look, he has the most wins of any current college baseball coach. It's undisputed. But at the same time, when you have this much turmoil coming out of a baseball roster, it's difficult. And I sit here and I think about it and I say, okay, well, who's going to be back next year? How are they going to retool? So Roman Kimball's father has already pretty much said that he's gone. That was on Facebook and social media. Then Dalton Mayshore, he's a senior. I don't think he has any eligibility left. Jarvis Evans, Jr., is he going to stick around? Talmadge LaCroix, he has opportunity to come back. Blake Jackson, he's done. Henry Kazmar, I don't know. Nolan Araki, he's probably going to come back. I mean, he has eligibility to come back, but like I can go down this entire roster, Alex, and based on what I've been told, it is 50-50 anybody comes back.
I think, the two that everybody's going to really keep an eye on are KJ Scobie and Bo Hollins. Like those two really played well as for young guys or as the season went along. And I mean, KJ Scobie defensively the whole year played a really good third base and continued to get better. And I think and then the bat really started to come along. And you see that a lot with freshmen. Like, the hitting will come along, but the defense will stay consistent. And I mean, he was one of South Carolina's better hitters. And really both of those guys were Scobie and Hollins. So you want to see what you can do to keep those guys, because they, obviously you have to imagine that a lot of teams being in the SEC saw how good those guys are and are going to want them. And that's two that I think a lot of people are going to keep their eye on. And obviously there's a handful more players that, everybody's going to keep their eye on. But, Holland, I think, Scobie and Hollins are kind of the top of the list guys that everybody's going to be talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, when you hear some of the things that have come out and things that have been sourced and well documented, and look, yeah, if you're not a member of the Big Spur, join, because John Whittle's been all over this. If you're not listening to JB, look, John Whittle and JB, I think, are the best baseball guys for South Carolina in the world. Like, and look, John's going to be on our show next week. So really excited for that. But you hear things like pitchers aren't doing fielding practice, and they haven't done it since January. You hear that they're not using the TrackMan except for to look over what happened in the game, like not even using it to perfect pitches. You hear the pitchers don't even know if they're going to start until a couple of hours before the game. I mean, how many times, Alex, did y'all in the Big Spur put out an article saying like TBD Saturday, TBD Sunday? Yeah. And the big question is, how many players that were in the doghouse this year for something that they normally would not be in the doghouse for are just fed up with it. And look, Palmineri is not a quitter. I know that. And Palmineri has a way of doing things. And he's the head coach at South Carolina right now and going to be the head coach next year. Terry Rooney's coming back. Monty Lee is coming back. Palmineri just said that he's not making any coaching changes. So the same way that Cam Pringle had 1 year to capitalize on his name, image, and likeness and leave South Carolina as a redshirt freshman to go somewhere else, to go to Syracuse and play football and maybe get, a little bit more money than he was getting at South Carolina, maybe equal, better opportunity to play, whatever. Palmineri, this is a big offseason because you can only be a 500 team in the SEC at South Carolina so many years before you're old, man. I don't want to play for you. Like, South Carolina sucks now. Like, so he's got to capitalize. And I don't know about NIL. I know that folks I've talked to said that there's going to be an ample amount of NIL. It's picking and choosing the right players. And then it's potentially retooling 75% of your roster.
And kind of to the NIL point as well, and it has been talked about a lot, but if you give the example of, if South Carolina's going after a pitcher that, who could, an LSU or Florida wants, then maybe South Carolina can offer a little bit more. But, Florida and LSU, just using that example, examples, like, those teams are going to be playing for or vying for national championship this year and playing for that. And does South Carolina have to pay a little bit more to be able to get those guys? Like, there's so many different pieces that's why I say it's going to be such an interesting offseason, see what they can do, because there's so many different variables in this.
And I cannot wait for John to come on the show next week. Like, I am going to shut up and let John talk. And I can't wait because, look, John, and I love John to death. He is not an overly critical person. He's very even flow. But at the same time, John knows more about this program's in and outs than I think Palmineri does, than Terry Rooney does. Maybe even more than Monty Lee, to be honest, because John's been around here for 15, 20 years now. So excited to have John next week. That's going to be it for baseball tonight. We'll save some more baseball content for next week when it'll be a little bit more of a deader time in the news, hemisphere, or the Gamecock news hemisphere. Alex, so we got some official visits coming up. But summertime is official visit time. Again, I remind everyone to go listen to Darren Usher today on the show with JB. It was a really, really good interview. I think Alex actually has something up on the Big Spur recapping that interview. But y'all, we appreciate you so much. When you spend your time with us, you give us the most valuable thing you have, and we never take it for granted. Alex, any parting shots before we get out of here?
No, it's good to be back after having the week off. Obviously, we had a lot to talk about tonight, but as you mentioned, things will get picked up a little bit next week. We'll have a lot to talk about coming off the softball series at Super Regional. With South Carolina be preparing to get on the way to Oklahoma City for the College World Series. It's a lot to talk about, and then recruiting will really pick up next week. You got those first official visits, not this upcoming weekend, but the next, and it's rolling from there. So we'll have it all covered here.
And then we're going to roll into 7-on-7 and offensive lineman, defensive lineman camps. And then that's what I'm excited for, man. I can't wait to get back to that. That was so much fun.
Yeah, you had those official visits and the camp season. And like I said before, the season's here. So it really starts to pick up steam and head into June and then July. And then before you know it, August will be here.
Yeah, every day, Alex, I look and say, how are we closer to June than we are to April? It makes no sense.
It's crazy.
Well, again, we appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Make sure that you follow Alex Jones at Alex_Jones6 on Twitter, it looks like.
45.
Okay, 45. But just zoom in. You can find us on Twitter. If you're not on the Big Spur, go ahead and check that out. It's a 24/7 message board where you can talk Gamecock sports until you're blue in the face. And we have a lot of people that do it, and it's a lot of fun. So for that, Alex, I'm going to sign us off. Thank you again for being here tonight, Alex, and we appreciate you as well. And with that, we'll see you next week.